Esters. Esters are hydrocarbon derivatives, and they contain this functional group. So there's a C with a double bonded O, and that carbon is connected to an oxygen that is connected to another carbon, and there's another group over here. And this side, there's another group over here. So esters have pleasant odors and flavors, and they're found in nature and are also found in artificial flavors. So they're used in the food and perfume industries. Alcohols react with carboxylic acid to make esters, so their names are used to name them. So basically what we will have is we will have an alcohol plus a carboxylic acid, and this will make a water molecule and an ester. So the alcohol and the carboxylic acid names are used to come up with a name for the ester. So you're going to find the root. This is the main chain that contains the carbonyl group, and this will come from the acid portion. Except what we're going to do is we're going to drop the oic acid part of the name and add oate to the end as the suffix. For the prefix, we're going to identify the carbon chain that's attached to the O in the part here. So we're going to figure out what the carbon chain length is. And that is going to be named using the alkyl group. So if it was ethanol, it's now ethyl. If there's a side group on the main chain, this part, it also becomes part of the prefix. The number starts at 1 for the carbonyl group, so you would count from that group. The prefix from the alcohol will come first, then the side group prefix for the acid portion, and then the root followed with the oate. So it seems a bit complicated, but we'll make it clear for you. Okay, so let's take a look at this ester. So we need to find the portion that contains the carbonyl group. So if you look here, this is the carbonyl group. So this part came from the acid. This portion that just has the single bonded oxygen came from the alcohol. So the acid portion contained 3 carbons. So it would have been propanoic acid. So that portion becomes propanoate, because we take off the oic acid and add oate. So propanoate. And then we look at the other portion, what's left, and we have 2 carbons, so that would have come from ethanol. So that prefix becomes ethyl. Take the alcohol and you write it as the alkyl group. So ethanol would be ethyl. So this structure is called ethyl propanoate. If we look at the second structure, we can see that we have our carbonyl group here. So this came from our acid, and then this part with a single bonded O came from our alcohol. So we know that the prefix for 2-carbon alcohol will be ethyl. And then this portion over here has 4 carbons in its longest carbon chain, so that came from butanoic acid, so that becomes butanoate, but it also has a side group. So you also have to name the side group, but the side group comes in after the side group for the alcohol. So this would be ethyl for the alcohol, and then it would be 3-methyl butanoate. So just a quick once over. Here's our ethyl from our alcohol. Here's the butanoate from our butanoic acid. And then counting from the C double bond O is carbon number 1, 2, 3. Our side group is 1 carbon, so it's a methyl. And it's on the 3rd carbon. So ethyl for the alcohol, 3-methyl for the side group on the acid portion, and the acid portion was 4 carbons long. So ethyl, 3-methyl butanoate. Drawing is a little simpler. Identify the root, so draw the carbon chain and add your carbonyl group. Identify the prefix, add O to the carbonyl carbon, and then draw in the alkyl carbon chain. If there's prefixes for other side groups, count from the carbonyl group and place on the side of the carbonyl, not on the alcohol side. So butyl propanoate. So we're told that the alcohol was 4 carbons long, so you've got an O, single bonded O, attached to 4 carbons. And then propanoate tells us that the acid was propanoic acid, so the carbonyl group was on a chain of 3 carbons. So draw your 3 carbons, put in your double bonded oxygen, so there's your carbonyl group, and a chain of 3 for propane, and then stick on your O from your alcohol, and it's butyl, so it's 4, so there's 4 carbons attached. So here's the structure with all of the hydrogens put in. Here is the propanoate portion, and here's the butyl portion. So this denotes the alcohol portion, and this denotes the acid portion. Okay, looking at this name, the first prefix comes from the alcohol, so we know that it's 2 carbons long. We have another prefix, so that tells us that our longest carbon chain with a carbonyl group has a side group on carbon number 2, and it's a cyclopentyl group. And then the longest carbon chain with a carbonyl is 6 for hex. So the first thing you're going to do is draw out your hexanoate portion. So your 6 carbons. Put in your double bonded O. Put in your bonds for all your other atoms. And the alcohol was your ethyl group. So you've got an O and then 2 carbons. So this portion refers to this, and this part is this. So now we've got to put on our other side group. So 2 cyclopentyl. So when we name, the carbonyl is 1, so the next one beside it is 2, and it's cyclopentyl. So draw in your cyclic pentane. And then the rest of the atoms are hydrogens. So here's the structure: ethyl 2-cyclopentyl hexanoate. So in terms of physical properties, they're slightly polar due to the carbonyl group and the COC bond, but it can't make hydrogen bonds. It can accept hydrogen bonds, but it can't make hydrogen bonds. So it has a lower boiling point than alcohols and the carboxylic acids. But we do have London dispersion and dipole-dipole because it's polar. So they're fairly strong intermolecular forces. They have very strong aromas, but they are volatile. They are volatile means particles escape the surface fairly easily. That's why we can smell them. Carbons 2 to 4 are fairly soluble, but once they get carbon length of 5 carbons, they become insoluble. So they can only be dissolved, they can only form hydrogen bonds with water if they're small.